Hi, this is Dennis, Second Chance Tackle. Today I have the pleasure of working on an oldie but goodie. This is a D.A.M quick 330. It's a reel made in West Berlin, Germany. D.A.M is German for the Deutsche Angling Manufacturer, or the German fishing reel company. And I'm going to show you how to take this reel apart. It's the model 330, and it applies to most of the D.A.M quick reels. And you'll be able to see how to service this and how to keep it running for years to come. This reel, I believe it was made in the late 70s. I could be off for a decade one way or the other, but I think in the 70s is a fair one. I'm going to just show you, you can remove the button to access the drag washers, or if you like, it has that feature with that button release, the quick release for the spool change. Simply push down and pull it off, and that will remove the spool. Well, we're going to do a couple of things with this reel. We're going to go inside it and make sure that everything is good. We'll show you how to clean it up. We'll show you how the gear comes together. And we'll answer a question first. The first question somebody had is, what is this all about, this little switch down here? Well, that's a forward switch on a left-handed crank. If you wanted to override the anti-reverse, you go to the middle position. And if you wanted to switch this to a right-handed retrieve, well, that's the position for that, and you would move the handle from this side to that side. And anybody interested in seeing that, there's more to it than just swapping the main gear. You have to change the pivot arm for the axle shaft, the crosswind arm. But I did a video on that. If you're interested, you can look that up in my catalog and see how that works. So that's the switch there. We're going to set that switch to the override position. We're going to start by taking this handle assembly off. And as I start, I want to encourage you to subscribe to my channel if you like these types of videos, if you want to learn about fishing reel repair, or maybe you even have a reel that needs service. Well, I have a lot of those in my catalog, and I am constantly adding to them. So if you subscribe, hit that notification button, and you'll see all the ones that are new and all the ones that are existing can be accessed just by searching Second Chance Tackle, and then put in your reel type and see what comes up. But there's over 300 videos in that library now, and each one of them will pretty much do what I'm doing here. It'll show you how to take the reel apart, how to clean and inspect the pieces and parts, and how to put it back together again. And that last stuff by no means is trivial, because a lot of folks send me reels that they have been unsuccessful in putting back together. Before you take this off, notice two things. Notice that the click button is to the back of the reel, and the badge here is kind of, when you lay it flat like this, that's how you read the words, right? All right, let's see if we can just simply take that off. Well, we can't. We have to access that other side to remove that crosswind. When you do this, make sure that you note the screws on this. I believe one side may be shorter than the other. It's a possibility, and I'm not certain. So what I would recommend that you do here is to remove the screws, put them on your desk to check that they're all the same size, and then separate them in the parts tray. Now, you do use a parts tray, right? I do. It's off camera. It's nothing more than a bottom of a fast food container. But we're going to take these and put them on the other side, and we're going to pull this badge, which has been on there for some time now. Oh, let's take one more screw out of this. And this is always important to note when you're working on these reels, is that which is which side plate. It's easy enough to get these confused. All right, well, that screw is smaller than the other two. Now pull that whole piece up, and I guess I couldn't get that badge out because there's some pretty well dried grease on here. Whoa, is that dried? It just comes kind of out in a chunk. And that's one of the things about this, is when you do work on these reels. Cleaning is probably the number one culprit, or lack of cleaning is the culprit in why these reels slow down in feature and function. Well, this is the inside of your reel then. This is what we were talking about, the crosswind arm that's holding the axle shaft, and it's attached to the main gear. And you can see we just have silly putty in here, right? We just have old, very caked dried grease. So I'm certain once we address that grease cleanup, we are going to have one very nice turning reel. Well, there's a small screw on the bottom of the axle shaft here that's holding that crosswind gear in place. So we're going to use a micro screwdriver for that. This is a good place to tell you to take pictures along the way. Very easy to mess these reels up if you're depending on your memory in terms of where the pieces and parts came from and how they go back. So I would encourage you to take the pictures, and this is a great place right here to take the picture. Take the picture of the screw. It's going to go into a smaller part in my parts tray. Take a picture of the internals so that you see exactly where it is and which way it's oriented. It's very easy to flip this one around when you go to reinstall, and it's just convenient right now to take that picture. You pull up to get the axle shaft off. I use paper towels, and if I need a degreaser, I'll use a penetrating oil for the degreaser. All right, I'm going to remove the C-clip now on that arm. That's a simple push off. Be careful when you remove these. These can spring very quickly, and they can cause a lot of problems trying to find them. And if you don't find them, well, they're not easy to find in the secondary markets as replacement parts. This arm will now come out. As I mentioned, it's this way, but if you go to swap the handles, you're going to have to flip it to get that right. Now we should be able to pull that whole main gear assembly out. And one of the things that's interesting about this reel is there's a pin holding the main gear onto the shaft here. So we'll have to address that. All right, last part of the disassembly then is to remove the rotor. I believe that's a 12 millimeter. It is, I'm lucky. And I happen to have a deep socket 12 millimeter Mitchell wrench here, but you don't need that. A deep socket of any description will do. But I believe it's going to have to be a deep socket. You're not going to be able to get a traditional box wrench in there. It's just too much of a lip on that rotor. So if you have questions on this reel or any reel in particular, and you'd like to learn more about a reel, or maybe you have the reel and you just don't know certain things to it, well, if you leave that in the comments section, I'll be happy to try and answer that question for you. All right, we have a little catch washer here and a little eared washer here as well. I don't know if we need to remove those. Just going to leave those in here for now. And while I have that rotor assembly off, I'm going to just put a little bit of penetrating oil onto the seams where the bail meets the rotor case. Just work it in a little bit. Let's keep that fresh. You do not need to remove a bail unless you're finding that it's sticking and being problematic. What I do like to do is to make sure that all of those moving parts, this is the trip lever, that all of that is addressed as part of the cleanup. All right, there's a snap ring here which is holding the balance of that assembly on. So I'm going to get my snap ring plier here. Those have 2 points on the end of them. They're going to go into the 2 circles for that snap ring. And again, just like the other pieces, you want to make sure that you kind of hold these tight. And that doesn't shoot out on you, because that will be nerve-wracking to say the least. You have a kind of a wobbly washer here. Not easy to say. That goes underneath. But then we should be able to pull that whole assembly out. One more washer up top. There's a lot of old grease in here, so I'm going to flood this with the penetrating oil as well. That's a big bearing. it appears that that inner race may be frozen to the shaft. And if that's the case on a reel this age, you kind of leave it unless you notice that the bearing is having a problem. This one seems to be spinning freely, but I'm noticing as I turn all of this that that inner race is not turning. And sometimes you just need to know when to leave good enough alone, and this is one of those situations where you don't want to try to force the removal of the bearing and damage a piece that maybe you can't find again. So we're just going to let that go. I'm going to take a cotton swab and make sure we go through the arbor to pick up all of the old grease and that's inside the pinion gear. And while I have all of this out, we're going to take a hard bristle brush. I use a kind of a dollar store brush, but you don't need that. You can use a toothbrush or anything. And you'll notice I'm pulling towards me, and I'm having all of that grease and old dirty oil and the like land onto the paper towel. I'll take a clean section of paper towel, wipe down the rest. We can check that for some lint there. Seems to be a little bit of lint left over. Check all of the grooves here. You want to make sure that they're uniform, that they're not in any way bent or have burrs on them or anything like that. Then we're going to go ahead and put this fishing reel oil onto the bearing. We're just going to let that sit and soak itself in there. Well, we know the case has got just a little bit of dirt on it, so let's take care of that. At this point, I'm going to use a screwdriver as a scraper blade just to get most of that off. And otherwise, this case, for the most part, is very clean. And a lot of the servicing has to do just with that, just making sure that your pieces are clean, that they're not broken or worn, and that they're not in any way a problem that needs to be addressed. All right, that's your case. Now you have this gear, and a lot of times you don't have to take the gear off in the servicing, especially if it's working okay. For the sake of this and showing you how to do that should you need to, I'm going to try and find a punch, because there's a roll pin in the gear that holds this on. And you sort of need to find the right one. I have a punch set here. I'm going to see if we can't get this out. One more, two more. There you go. So you have to knock that punch pin or roll pin out, and you can see it's got the slot in it. Don't lose that as well. There's a couple of small pieces. Now we should be able to remove the main gear, and we should be able to remove the shaft, and then we can service the balance of this. And again, a lot of people skip this particular piece because, well, it's not easy to do that shaft and punch pin, and a lot of times it just doesn't need it. But I thought for the sake of showing everybody how to do that, well, that's how we do it. Okay, we're going to just clean the inside of this. Very light lube on the shaft here. This goes back on. Let's take care of the gear. Same thing here. Inspect all of the teeth on the gear. Make sure that they're all clean. It's a beautiful gear. Use that brush. Brush out any of the dirt and greases that have accumulated there. While I have the gear off, it's an easy way to show you how you get that click noise. So you have a series of circle indentations here, or holes. And here is your click. And your click is a stud. So that stud runs in and out of these holes, making that click bounce noise. Doesn't hurt to put a little bit of oil onto that. Now you want to start your roll pin back into the gear. For the reinstall. And that has to be right at the edge, but not in, because you don't have the reach. A little bit. There you go. So that's what you want to look for. And of course, now you've got to line that up with the hole in the axle shaft. And then you're reversing the process now. You're kind of knocking it in. You get a little bit bigger arm here. Too big. Those of you that are gunsmiths know all about this stuff. Okay, there you go. That was easy enough. It's always easier putting them in than taking them out for whatever reason. But there you go. I just used a wider brim so that I could get it flush to that hole and get that pin in that way. All right, we're going to put a little bit of grease onto our main gear's teeth, and then we're going to do the reassembly of this reel. All I need to do is find my grease brush. You can tell there's a lot of moving parts to this kind of service, and you want to keep track of it. That's why that parts tray is so good. All right, that's the main gear assembly now. Remember what we said, when you go to reinstall this, that click mechanism kind of points towards that fish. I'm just going to take the 3 screws. These screws are independent of each other. Some of the reels, the quick reels, have through screws that go right through to the other badge. This is not one of those. This has the 2 sides. So you're going to want to take this to the advantage. You can put this whole side on before you go further. And this is a good place for you to note which way went which, right? We remember this is a left-handed cranked wheel. It's easy to confuse these pieces and parts. I've seen, not only on this, but I've seen it on the Mitchell 302, for example, where you have both side plates come off. And I've seen some very unusual installations. Let's just leave it at that, an unusual installation. How's that? And some problems that occur with that. So in this case, we're good there. So Rick brought me this reel as part of a few reels. He's a local customer of mine. But if you have a reel that needs to be serviced or repaired, and you're interested in learning more about my repair services, send a note to my email that's on the business card that follows. I'll be happy to provide you with reel repair information. All right, just cleaning up the bottom of this now. Remember that this has the C-clip, which is going to hold this in. So we'll get this started. Clear the path. Make sure that you have the distribution right there. Make sure you have access to that little circle. Then you're going to take that C-clip and slide it into the slot. And a lot of times you can do this by finger pressure. Sometimes you can't. In this case, we can. So there's your C-clip. Now we want to take the oiled bearing. Again, unfortunately, that looks like that inner collar is frozen there. Now, if you needed to remove this, you could remove it. And how would you do that? Find something like a bench vise where you can grab the wings, leave that tail through there. Grab the wings of a bad bearing, leave the tail hang through. Get a block of wood so that you don't damage any of the threads, and just tap it out that way. In this case, we're just going to be satisfied that we're good with that. I'm going to grab the brush with the grease on it. Make sure we get a nice fresh coating of grease onto the pinion gear. And then we can reinstall the gear into the cavity. And we have that wavy, or we have the bearing shield first. And we have the wavy washer. Make sure that gets down. And then we have the clip with the snap ring. Too many things here. Start it in the groove, hold it in the back so it doesn't jump. If you need a little bit more clearance to get it into the rim, just push in with your screwdriver. We're good there. Now we want to grab our crosswind block and our axle shaft. Again, if that axle shaft is not clean, if you're finding debris on there, maybe some pitting, go ahead and use something like steel wool to get that done. And we'll set that aside. We're going to grab our rotor now and install the rotor nut. Now this came off in a traditional counterclockwise manner. So it's going to go back on in a clockwise, or the old righty-tighty. And I like to start these by hand, just so that you don't cross-strip it. Again, a deep socket is the way to go with this. And then we can take our axle shaft that's been lightly greased. That goes in next. And now you need to line the hole in the axle shaft with that crosswind arm. And we need that little pin that's also serving as a screw. And this one requires a micro driver to put that in. You can get these micro driver sets just about anywhere, dollar stores or whatever. They're not very expensive. But sometimes you feel like a watchmaker with the tools you need. In this case, you need that smaller one. Make sure it's nice and tight. It's a good time to give it a test. What a beautiful piece of equipment. Now you know why everybody really likes these reels. Beautiful reel all around. All right, we're going to take our side plate cap. That goes next. And there's really no order, it doesn't matter, but there was a little screw holding it on the bottom here, so let's go put that one in first. Kind of like last out, first back in on this side. And in this case, this one didn't need more than just the one, and then of course the ones on the badge. So those are next. These reels were built to compete with the Mitchell 300 series, and I think they've stood the time. It is kind of interesting how a lot of the manufacturers of that period that were kind of competing against Mitchell numbered their reels 300 as well. So D.A.M's not the only one, it's a 330, but Ocean City at the time was building the reels, and they had a 300 series. And it's all kind of like Mitchell set the standard with the 300. Had a lot of their reels, 302, 304, etc., were numbered that way, and a lot of the other manufacturers came in. Of course, there's no patent or copyright on 300, right? That's just a number, and a lot of them just kind of use the same numbering scheme to let folks know that they're comparable in size and use to some of the other products on the market, predominantly Mitchell. All right, those three are in. I'm going to just do a little bit of a spray here. Just a little bit of accumulated dirt I noticed here. I'm going to use that penetrating oil as a degreaser. See if I can't clean that little bit of dirt in that cavity there. And the corresponding dirt on the other side. I'm going to use a fishing reel cleaner. It's Penn's Rod and Reel Cleaner. We'll use that just kind of a little, get the grease from my gloves and everything off. This is a cleaner and a wax all in one. Find out it does a nice job. Somebody asked me if it restores the luster on a reel that's gotten UV damage. It does not. It kind of hides the UV damage for a little bit, but like anything else, when it evaporates, it's kind of gone. All right, let's give it a ride. Let's put that spool back on. There are drags under here if you do want to service the drags. Most of the time I find that it's not necessary, but remove this button. There's a little C-clip under there and one or two drags. Okay, nothing more then. They give it the final test. So we have a D.A.M quick 330. We showed you how to take this apart, service it piece by piece, including knocking the roll pin out to access that main gear and behind the main gear. And here we go. Certainly working forward. working in neutral. And you can tell it's a little bit quieter in neutral because you don't have that piece rubbing against the back. And then from the lefty side, that's the click mechanism. And then let's check that bail, make sure that that bail's firing, and it is. So there you go. That is the D.A.M Quick 330. And before we leave, I want to spend this moment with a special shout out to our first responders and essential personnel and everybody involved in keeping us safe during the pandemic. Your efforts truly are appreciated. So all, please stay safe, stay well, and stay watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.